Yo, what's going on YouTube? It's your boy Kyle checking in with another video. And today we got serial killer Larry Hall, the grave digger. This right here is a documentary on a serial killer. Let's go on and get into it. I don't know who Larry Hall is. I never heard of him. Watching that Jeffrey Dahmer stuff got me want to know who is these serial killers. And this is my serial killer
A farmer
documentaries.
tending his fields in rural Indiana one balmy winter day in November 1993 thought nothing of his morning activities. He was going to climb into his combine and work the fields like he always did each morning. However, that day on November 6, 1993, would not be like any other day. Shortly after starting his morning work, in his own words, he noticed a black mass lying in between the rows of corn. He climbed down
A black mass.
from his combine to remove what he initially thought to be a bag of trash or some other rubbish. To his absolute horror, the black mass in front of his farm equipment was not a trash pile, but rather a decaying human corpse.
Huh?
Soon after alerting local authorities, the sheriff's office thought that the body might be that of a missing Georgetown, Illinois girl by the name of Jessica Roach. Jessica had been reported missing on the afternoon of September 20th, 1993, as she was walking alongside her bicycle near her rural Illinois home. Though about 50 miles away from Georgetown, with so few homicides and even fewer disappearances, local authorities had a sneaking suspicion that the body was that of Jessica. Once police had recovered her body, which had been mauled by other farm machinery at some point in time in the past that had also severed its head, the remains were sent off to the state's leading forensic pathologist in Terre Haute, Indiana. When the medical examiner first looked at the body, he thought it could not be Jessica due to the severe state of decomposition. However, local authorities in Georgetown, Illinois were almost positive that the unidentified body was that of 15-year-old Jessica Roach. When the sheriff that had jurisdiction
Why they keep saying it's her? Like, what makes them get this clear depiction that it's her?
over Georgetown asked Jessica's parents for her death
Like, how close is the cities or states that this happened in? I know it said Georgetown, Indiana, but where is the body at now? Like, in this, where he's talking about? Like, where is it at? Like, where was it found at? Was it also found in Indiana?
dental records. They were dismayed that these records did not exist. However, her mother had an ace up her sleeve. When Jessica was a little girl, the same sheriff's office had sent officers to the local elementary school to teach the kids about what law enforcement does. As part of the visit, each child was fingerprinted, and by a small miracle, Jessica's mom had kept the fingerprint card over a decade later. Once the medical examiner in Indiana had Jessica's fingerprint card, he was able to compare the lone usable fingerprint recovered from the body. Unfortunately for her parents, it was a match. The young and vivacious Jessica Roach had met a brutal and violent end just after a short 15 years on this earth. Her whole future was thrown away, just like her murderer had dumped her in that Indiana cornfield.
15 years old, bruh. 15 years old. That's nothing. Like, you haven't even started life. Like, you haven't even got on your own. Like, that's
With Jessica's body now positively identified, it was up to the area's chief investigator, Gary Miller, to solve her murder. Unbeknownst to him at the time, it would be his doggedness and determination that would open the floodgates into possibly one of the nation's most prolific, yet unknown serial killers. Even though Miller had Jessica's remains, he had little else. The best evidence that he had were several witnesses that had reported a two-tone Dodge van with out-of-state license plates that had been seen cruising the area in the days before and the day of Jessica's disappearance. His best eyewitness came later from a local Indiana man who had
Y'all, man, we live in. I'm so happy that we live in this day and age that we live in now, where there's cameras everywhere and like tracking devices and stuff like that. Cause man, y'all people had it tough. The '60s, the '70s, the '80s, the '90s, the early 2000s. Like people had it tough. This is just
seen that same Dodge van parked alongside the road next to the cornfield.
like I remember growing up. They used to tell us like, don't talk to strangers. I mean, we still do that now. My kids is young. They don't talk to strangers anyway. But you know, like when you go home by yourself, like if you don't get on the bus or nothing, and you go home by yourself, and you don't talk to strangers and stuff like that. Like, be aware of your surroundings. Go straight home, stuff like that. Man, this stuff just be crazy.
Where Jessica was later found. Beyond the man being Caucasian and of short height with a stocky build, there was nothing else for Miller to go on. That was until the following spring. On March 29, 1994, two local teenage girls were walking home near the small college town of Marion, Indiana. As the two 14-year-olds were walking alongside
14.
Indiana Wesleyan University, they
Y'all
saw a
babies.
strange man driving slowly in a two-tone Dodge van. At first, thinking the man might have been just looking for somewhere to park or pull into, the girls did not think anything of it. However, after a couple of blocks of the van following slowly behind them, they noticed that the driver was seemingly following them. Becoming more perturbed at the
Hey, hey. Keep up, girl. We out of here. His ass got to catch us on feet. But that's just tough, though. Like, that's just tough. Like,
sight of the man,
if you don't
the
got
girls
no
began
neighborhood,
walking faster and
like if you don't got them neighborhood kids that go to school with you, like I'm talking about like a big pack of kids in the neighborhood, because that's what I had. Like we had neighborhood kids that went to school with us type shit, so it's like the whole neighborhood. But it's just tough when it's like either you by yourself or it's just you and one other person. Cause you got creeps like this. I mean, I don't know if this still happens, cause like I said, we got cameras and it's just so much stuff going on. But this just is weird, bro.
faster to escape the man. The driver then sped up and pulled alongside the girls. As he lowered his window, they took off running.
Yeah.
Thankfully for them, the girls were not far from their homes and quickly got home out of breath and
Yeah.
terrified. The girls told one of their fathers, who immediately hopped into his truck and began looking for the would-be abductor. After cruising the streets of Marion for a short while, he spotted the van and wrote down its license plate. The father then began a short vehicle pursuit of the man, but lost him when he abruptly turned into a side alley and was gone. However, that would not be the end of that man's evening. After reporting the suspicious behavior to the police and the license plate the father had written down, local authorities in the Marion area were all issued to be on the lookout for the mysterious van. Later that evening, police officers patrolling nearby Gas City, Indiana, about 10 minutes away from Marion, spotted the van. Responding officers approached carefully. With guns drawn, the men were leery of the suspect as he had been accused of an attempted kidnapping. After approaching the driver's side of the van, officers were greeted with the stunned face of 33-year-old Larry Dwayne Hall. After securing Hall and placing him into custody, the police searched his van to see if there were any victims inside. While no one else was inside, what officers found was extremely troubling and what soon got the attention of both Indiana and Illinois detectives. Inside the van is what only can be described as a rape kit. A large hunting knife, a ski mask, duct tape, rope, several belts, several rags, condoms, and 2 cans of starter fluid were all located in the cargo compartment.
Man, you niggas be sick, bruh. I say this all the time, bro. If y'all want vagina that bad, bro, there's women out there that you can pay for. Why do creep stuff like this to any woman? I don't care what that. It's women out here you could just like, come on, look at this guy, man. Fucking weirdo.
But what was even more chilling were the documents found. Taped alongside the wall of the van was a missing persons poster for a young college student named Trisha Rietler. Trisha had disappeared one evening walking back to her dorm from nearby IWU exactly a year to the day and had not been seen since. Also inside were several pornographic magazines with the name Trisha Rietler on them, along with some IWU stationery with her name on it. The women in the magazine cutouts also had what appeared to be nooses tied around their necks, blood coming out of their mouths, and blacked out teeth drawn in a way to signify that they had been knocked out. Obviously, Gas City police were stunned at what they discovered. At first, not knowing what to charge him with, they initially hauled him off to county jail for his license plate not matching the vehicle registration. During the interrogation into Trisha's disappearance, Hall confessed to murdering and burying Trisha. He then told police where they could find her body. However, when police went to the area where he said he had buried her, no body could be found. With no hard evidence linking Hall to the crime, he was let go since police thought he was just a wannabe suspect who was eerily fascinated with the case. But who was Larry Hall? After all, Hall had not been a suspect in Trisha's disappearance. However, local police in Marion and Wabash began to dig into who exactly this Hall...
We letting go of a nigga, even if the nigga's playing. Why are we letting this nigga go? We searched his vehicle. We see all this fucking crazy shit. Why are we letting this man go? He admitted to saying, hey, I murdered somebody. Here's where you can find her. And even though you didn't find her, he still admitted to it.
Hall character was. Hall and his identical twin Gary were born on December 11th, 1962. After a difficult delivery that included Hall being diagnosed with a twin transfusion, that's where one identical twin starts to become parasitic towards the other in the womb. Hall lived a very abnormal childhood. His father was the caretaker of the Falls Cemetery in Wabash, Indiana. His job was not only to take care of the grounds, but also to dig the graves and bury the corpses of the recently departed. Probably due to the macabre nature of his work, his father drank heavily and was seen as gruff and antisocial. His mother was no better off. Known for her quick temper, narcissism, and laziness, the Hall brothers' mother was best recognized for the horrible conditions she kept in the already old house they lived in on the cemetery grounds. While the house itself may have been old, it was a beautiful home and had a huge backyard with surrounding woods that the boys could lose themselves inside. However, there was always the specter of the thousands of graves that lie in front of the home that gave it such an eerie, gothic feeling. Perhaps taking after their fathers and the home's personality, the brothers were known to be unruly even from a young age. Their childhood friends noted they often liked to play harmful pranks on people in the town. Sometimes they would leave a wallet full of money in the road attached to a string. When passers-by would see it, they'd stop and try to pick up the wallet, only for the two boys to pull it away. Another prank involved something similar, but more macabre. The two brothers dressed up a mannequin to look like a dead body. They would then leave it on the side of the road as cars drove by. When the police would inevitably show up, they would find that the body had been moved, only to reappear somewhere else later that night.
Are we not hearing these fucking creeps doing weird shit? Okay, what if it's not him? What if it's his twin that's doing it? still admitted to it. Man, these niggas, that's crazy. That's what I'm saying. Like,
The only real trouble the boys got into growing up was one time when they broke the storefront windows of some shops on Main Street. A witness identified one of the friends they were with, and he soon told police that his friends had also gotten involved. Why this act of
Today, we're going to be unboxing these headphones that I bought online.
petty vandalism might seem insignificant, how it played out was a harbinger of what was to come when real legal trouble came knocking at Larry's doorstep. When police questioned the brothers, they stood firm that their friend had done it, and only after intense police interrogation did they admit their guilt. Officers would later recall that despite their young age, the duo performed better than even hardened criminals under police interrogation. True to form, their mother and father protected the boys, stating that it was only their friend that must have broken the windows. The judge did not buy it, and the Hall brothers had to fork over $500 to fix the windows. Despite this minor vandalism incident, the two stayed out of trouble for the rest of their adult lives until police investigated Larry for Jessica's and Trish's cases. According to classmates, while both boys were loners, Larry was the shy, quiet one. He loathed public attention and was often mocked for his robotic-sounding voice. Though he was noted to have defended himself in fights on several occasions, Larry Hall was by no means outgoing or confrontational, unlike his brother Gary. Gary was everything that his brother Larry was not. Confident, athletic, and outgoing, Gary Hall had no problems getting girlfriends. However, as Larry Hall's friends would later attest, Larry never once had a girlfriend, despite longing for one and not being homosexual. What Larry lacked in his knowledge about women and dating, he made up for it with his love of fixing up cars. One of the
man, that be the thing. Like, he seemed like he's well put together. Look at this picture right here. Alright. He looked like an average male. Like, I'm sure a female will find him attractive. Why can't you get girls? Like, okay, confidence is it confidence? Low self-esteem? It's women out here with the same thing going on. Like, females out here with low self-esteem. Y'all can build each other up. Whatever you like, I'm sure there's a woman out there that likes the same thing and enjoy the same thing. Why do it click in your head that you need to be a killer or take advantage of somebody? Like, that shit just don't
their
make
father's
sense to
close
me.
friends loved to work on old cars. He made much more money than their family, and he allowed the boys to tinker with them in getting stock cars fixed up to become race cars. Known as street rods for taking commercial off-the-shelf cars and modifying them, the two, especially Larry, took a great liking to refurbishing and customizing vehicles. The two were known around the area as street rod fanatics, and when they were not in school, they were working on modifying cars. Even though they had little money, sometimes not even enough to put gas in the cars they worked on, the two had a great liking for racing and cruising around in the cars they helped create. About the time the twins were finishing high school, their father was let go from his job as the cemetery caretaker. While church officials had been leery of his heavy drinking throughout the years, they had tolerated it as long as he did his job well. However, it was not until it was discovered that the elder Hall had actually started putting the wrong people in the wrong graves that he was eventually fired. Because the house they lived in was tied to the job, the Hall family was forced to relocate to a run-down part of Wabash where they essentially lived in a one-bedroom shack. Not wanting to live like that, Gary Hall moved in with and eventually married the woman that would become his first wife. Larry was stuck living at home in the filth and squalor that his parents kept their new home in as well. For Larry, he wanted to still keep to himself. The best way he found to do this was by taking up a janitorial job where he got to clean buildings and office spaces at night. While doing his janitor job, Hall was noted as a hard worker and could be trusted at all times in any building he was at. In fact, he was so trusted that the buildings he worked at stopped paying for security guards and would let him lock up the place when he was done. He would also just report the number of hours worked and not have to clock in or out. During the day, Larry Hall decided that he wanted a new hobby besides fixing up cars. He got this inspiration from several television exposés on Civil War reenacting during the early 1980s. Intrigued by not only the fact of the lifestyle, but that each soldier got to create their own backstory and live a new life, Larry Hall was instantly hooked on the idea. After saving up enough money to buy his first uniform and replica rifle, he got his brother Gary interested in the hobby as well. Soon, the two joined the local reenacting group and started traveling the country to any reenactments they could. As part of Hall's entrance into this new persona, he began to dress and act like the soldier he emulated, even when he was not reenacting. He did this by growing the iconic pair of sideburns associated with period facial hair trends. These highly noticeable pieces of facial hair were inspired by the infamous Ambrose Burnside, who was also a local to the area. In Hall's mind, he wanted to eventually work his way up through the reenacting ranks to become General Burnside. However, his short height of 5 feet 4 inches and pudgy build would eventually prevent him from taking on this persona. For the time being, he'd have to be satisfied with his role as a private in the infamous Iron Brigade. As the years went on during the 1980s, the two brothers got into a routine. They'd work during the week and, on the weekends, travel to whatever reenactment they could. Because the reenactments made the soldiers camp out, they'd save money this way and traveled frequently. Their travels even took them to the sets of two famous movies, Glory and Gettysburg. Because their reenacting group was considered not only one of the most authentic, but also represented one of the most legendary formations in the Union Army, the group was invited to participate as extras in both films. While the brothers performed on set for both pictures, only Gary would get a momentary shot on the big screen when he was seen scrambling down a hill during a battle scene in Gettysburg. While police were not able to connect the dots at the time, whenever the twins left town for a reenactment, there appeared to be a strange correlation between missing and murdered women in the little towns the two traversed throughout the Midwest and South. This correlation would eventually tie Larry Hall to the dozens of homicides he's suspected of committing. But this connection would come years down the road. For now, Detective Miller was interested in just one homicide, that of Jessica Roach. During the 6 months that came after his March 1994 arrest and alleged murder confession,
multiple homicides, bro. Take both of them twins, lock them niggas up forever. Matter of fact, firing squad, bro. Like, you can't kill multiple. That's what I'm saying. Like, bro, the same thing with Jeffrey Dahmer. Firing squad, bro. Like, you don't get to live out your days. You don't get to do that no more, bro.
the little town of Georgetown, Illinois, had 2 other attempted abductions of young girls. In both cases, witnesses told the same story of a Caucasian man driving a 2-tone van, stopping to ask girls if they wanted a ride. For both attempted abductions, the license plate came back to Larry Hall. When Miller contacted Wabash authorities to ask if they knew Hall, their first question to him was if there had been any reenactments in the Georgetown area during the time Jessica disappeared. When Miller started doing some digging, he found that there had not been any Civil War reenactments, but there had been a Revolutionary War one just a few miles up the road from Jessica's house that very weekend. While Hall had been a Civil War reenactor most of his adult life, after his brother Gary stopped going to as many events after his first daughter's birth and subsequent remarriage, he started attending Revolutionary War events as well. Miller spoke to several people who had attended that event, as well as members from his reenacting unit. They all said that Hall would frequent Revolutionary War events in his Civil War regalia and stuck out like a sore thumb because of it. With these eyewitness statements in hand, Miller knew he had to speak with Hall right away about the homicide. Almost a year to the day of when Jessica's body was discovered, on November 2, 1994, Detective Miller arrived in Wabash to speak with Hall. Before arriving in Wabash, Miller had spoken with local detectives who were well aware of the creepy reputation Hall had acquired. While he had been charged recently with stalking a local Indiana woman, he had no other active cases against him. Local authorities had also warned that Hall was a very shy and elusive character. Whenever he faced any pressure, he'd clam up like a turtle and stop talking. Because of this, Miller would have to take a friendly and likable approach to the suspected murderer. However, that would change when he met detectives at the station who told him they would be meeting across the street in an empty conference room at City Hall. The change of venue was not something Miller wanted or planned on doing. After all, getting a meek and mellow guy like Hall in a room where he could speak one-on-one would more likely elicit a confession than a panel-style interview. Nonetheless, though this was his suspect, it was not his town. Shortly after meeting with Hall, he was surprised at just how shy he really was. With a downward gaze and soft voice, Hall looked and acted like a child who had been caught stealing a cookie from the cookie jar. Only, it was not. Though it may not look like it, Hall was suspected of murder and may have killed or abducted many more women. Perhaps this non-confrontational air about him convinced so many women that he was not a threat. While Miller could speculate all he wanted on other cases at a later time, for now he had to focus on Jessica. The conversation with Hall did not go anywhere anytime soon. Even though Hall had violently recoiled at Jessica's picture, Hall categorically denied anything to do with Jessica, her murder, and even being in Georgetown. The interview seemed to be going nowhere until the Wabash detectives chimed in. One of them told Hall to relate to Miller about the dreams he was having, and it was then that he started to talk. According to Hall, he had these horrible dreams where he abducts, rapes, and murders women. When asked about these dreams, Hall can give startling details. When Miller asked Hall to relate his dream about Jessica, the answer was startling. Hall said that he saw Jessica walking alongside her bike on a country road in Georgetown, Illinois. He asked her if she wanted a ride, and she agreed to that. Once in the van, he said that he kind of blacked out. The next thing he remembers is that they were both naked in the back of the van.
It's hard for me to just process this shit, bro, because a nigga got a daughter. Like, not even just a daughter, like, people just... I got females in my family, bro. Like, what the fuck? It's always the same thing. I blacked out. Dude, you don't need to be... Y'all need help. If you're not that sane to be with sane people, you need to get help. Help. Or isolate yourself. Get away from the world. You need to take isolation classes. Get your ass out of here. Go to a jail and say, hey, I cannot be in public with people anymore. Because this right here...
Man. He assumed that they had sex. At this point, Hall says that he panics and does not know what to do with her. He goes to a cornfield, leads her out of the van naked, and brings along 2 belts. He does not want to see her face when he kills her, so he puts her up against a tree, ties the belt around her neck, and squeezes it until he can no longer hear her struggling. While stunning, Hall is quick to remind the detectives that this is all just a dream. He never actually did anything of this, even though he has some incredible details. When pressed further, Hall does not want to talk about it anymore. Though there's great evidence, Miller still wants something physical connecting him to the crime. After all, the police in Gas City had considered him a wannabe when they believed he had falsely confessed to the abduction and murder of Tricia 6 months earlier. Armed with this confession, he then decided to get the FBI involved. Why Miller got the FBI involved is because he felt that the various police agencies in central Indiana were not doing enough to put Hall behind bars. Miller knew deep down that this guy was a serial killer, but that he could only work to solve the homicide local to his jurisdiction. Even though there's no federal homicide statute, Miller approached the FBI in Illinois to assist with the investigation, since Hall had traveled across state lines to commit this particular homicide. The FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office readily agreed. Miller was able to get a search warrant approved quickly to search the 2 vans Hall owned, along with the ramshackle hut he shared with his parents.
Hey, this reminds me of that movie, The Black Phone. Just based upon kids getting abducted, a van, shit like that. Like, this reminds me of The Black Phone.
He still wanted to conduct more interviews with FBI agents, but this would have to wait until the polygraph examiner arrived. For the time being, they'd need to seize whatever evidence they could. When agents searched Hall's van and room,
that's basically the same van that was in The Black Phone.
Found some of the most damning physical evidence to date. While there was no direct physical evidence to link him to the murders of Jessica or Tricia, they did find plenty of circumstantial evidence. Like the March traffic stop, they found a similar mobile rape kit in his van. They also found more pornographic pictures with similar things drawn on them. They also found a birth control prescription bottle of another missing Indiana woman underneath the front passenger seat. But it was what he wrote down that most shocked investigators. Written on various notepads and scraps of paper, Hall had taken detailed notes, plans, and instructions to himself for committing rapes and homicides. Instructions like no body contact, buy condoms, clean carpet a van, cut out bloodstains, were found written down. He also had taken detailed notes of surrounding Indiana counties on places to stalk women. For example, in Marion by the IWU campus, he'd scribbled notes like, lots of singles walking here. They take 44th and 43rd Street a lot. Must be campus housing nearby. Such a statement like this was damning, since this is almost the exact spot where Tricia was last seen alive near the IWU campus. Even more damning than the notes was the map. On a map of Indiana, Hall had put 2 red dots on it. These red dots just so happened to correlate to where Jessica's body had been dumped. This was the circumstantial evidence they would need to convict Hall of Jessica's murder. Armed with the evidence collected from the van, Miller and an FBI agent went to interview Hall again about Jessica.
This is why I tell people all the time, bro. Never leave your house without a weapon. I don't care what that, especially for women. I don't care what that weapon is. Pepper spray, a knife, fucking anything to defend yourself. Your goal when you leave your house is to make it back home. That's your goal. That's your main goal. Every day you walk out your door, your goal is to walk back inside your house.
And Tricia's murder. Faced with the evidence against him, Hall decided to talk again. Hall related a similar story about abducting and killing Jessica. Only this time, he mentioned a detail only the killer would have known. He said that she had a 10-speed bicycle and put it in his van. The fact that she had this kind of bicycle had never been made public. He also admitted to the murder of Tricia. According to Hall, in this supposed dream, he saw Tricia and he started talking to her. He claims that even though he pulled a knife on her, she willingly got into the van and had sex with him. When they were having sex, he said that he left his body and blacked out again. When he woke up, she was dead. He then went home, got a shovel and a hacksaw, and went into his van to dismember Tricia. After cutting up her body, he went and buried her near a local river. Eager to corroborate the story, he told investigators again where she'd been buried. The search would eventually turn up nothing, again. However, despite not having any hard evidence,
if y'all want to get evidence, how y'all want to get evidence, man, put a gun in this nigga head. Just that simple. Like all this beating around the bush when people got when their life is in jeopardy, when you got the gun and their life is in jeopardy, they gonna start spelling out everything that you want them. Y'all playing cat and mouse. Please tell us, Mr. Serial Killer. Just tell us what you got going on. Beat the shit out of this nigga. If that don't work, put the gun to the nigga head and say, bro, I'm tired of playing your fucking sick games, man. She willingly had sex with him because she was at fear for her life. Like, you can have whatever, just don't kill me. Hey, you want some pussy? Hey, I'll give it to you. Here, take it. Just don't kill me. Let me leave after this. Then he blacked out again and fucking killed her. You getting what you want. You just said you was whole lace. You said you ain't have no girls. 40-year-old virgin. Like, why do y'all gotta go to the extreme like this, bro?
The U.S. Attorney's Office, with Prosecutor Beaumont leading the government's case, wanted to charge him with what they could for now, the kidnapping and rape of Jessica Roach. Unfortunately for the government, this would be the last statement they got out of Hall before the trial. When Miller met up with Hall the next morning to take him to jail in Illinois, he told Miller that after speaking with his brother last night, he probably should not talk. Even though Miller would speak to Hall during the several-hour car ride nonstop, it was all about Civil War and car topics rather than the murders. What Miller did not know was the damage really done that night after he had called his brother Gary. Years later, in interviews with the media, Gary claimed that his brother told him to relay a message to his father to clean out any of his things the police did not find in the house and property. Gary said his father knew where these things were, and he spent the next several days burning numerous garbage bags full of items. The only thing that Gary would later claim he saw getting burned was a map that covered the states of Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin on it.
Man, Pops, you burning this nigga shit? Hey, you getting in this? Come on, man. Come on. Get your old ass over here, man. Get your old ass over here, because you know better. I don't give a fuck if that's your kids. You know better. Get your ass in the cell. Now your ass gonna rot here.
That was covered in red dots. But Miller and the FBI had no idea at the time that such vital evidence linking Hall to so many other murders was being destroyed as they spoke. All they knew was that they had an uphill battle against Hall in court. In deciding what to go to trial with, Beaumont decided not to charge Hall with the murder itself. Rather, he charged Hall with traveling across state lines for the sexual gratification of a minor. The trial was a slugfest between Beaumont and Hall's own high-powered defense attorney. Critical to the defense was their argument that all of Hall's statements had either been coerced or had been embellished because the police gave him the attention no one else did. However, this plan backfired even before Hall took the stand in his own defense. Not only had Hall demonstrated he had known key details like what kind of bicycle Jessica had and the map with the dump site marked, details only the killer could have known, but Hall's own testimony derailed his credibility. Before taking the stand, his lawyer argued how susceptible Hall was to coercion. Yet on the stand, he was able to stand toe-to-toe with one of the best prosecutors in the Midwest. His snarky comments, quick comebacks, and unwavering commitment to his denial of ever seeing Jessica Roach proved to the jury just how cunning Hall really was. The jury saw right through his act and sentenced him to the maximum punishment allowable, life in prison. While Hall...
Why do these niggas always get life in prison, bro? Yeah, we giving you 3 life sentences. We giving you 1 life sentence. We giving you 10 life sentences. Like, bro, why is that? Like, can we get some death? Firing squad. Fucking, I don't want to say lethal injection, but shit. You got fucking 7 niggas with rifles. Your life is like, dog, what the fuck? And it's like no way you can run to. Your ass is backed against a wall.
May have lost his fight for freedom. He did win in how he was to serve his sentence. He had demonstrated enough to the court for the judge to order Hall to serve his time in a federal mental institution in Missouri for evaluation and classification, since he was considered a vulnerable inmate. This, of course, still infuriated Beaumont and prosecutors in Indiana and Illinois, who still suspected Hall of murdering at least Tricia and probably many more. With Hall locked away, Beaumont and Miller did not forget about trying to get information out of Hall. They most importantly wanted to solve Tricia Rietler's murder, since they believed they had the most evidence for that due to his 2 confessions. However, they had no body and no physical evidence. When Beaumont was relating this to a fellow federal DEA agent one day, he suggested an inmate that could help Beaumont get what he needed: Jimmy Keene. Keene had been a popular high school football star in his small town in Illinois. After riding the high from his teenage glory years, he soon found himself headfirst in the drug smuggling world due to his popularity, good looks, and strong personality. After almost 2 decades of living the high life, Keene's world came crashing down. After losing his houses, cars, money, and 10 years of freedom, Keene was in a bad way. This was exacerbated by the fact that his father was in failing health, and he may not live long enough to see him free. That's why when he was summoned to Beaumont's office, the same man that had put him away, he was stunned at the deal he offered him. In exchange for befriending Hall in Springfield, Missouri, and extracting the location of Tricia's body, Beaumont would have his sentence reduced to time served. Keene jumped at the idea. His FBI handlers got Keene set up with a new identity and backstory to get him transferred to the prison hospital in Springfield. No one in the prison knew his true purpose except for the lead psychiatrist. His FBI handlers advised him to stay low for a while since Hall would frighten easily. However, his love for his father and desire to be released overruled what the FBI told him. Within hours of entering the prison, he purposefully bumped into Hall and introduced himself. Soon, Keene gained Hall's trust over the next several weeks after asking to eat breakfast each day with him and eventually meeting him in the library in the afternoons. It was only after gaining his trust that he started to question him about his cases. For months, Hall refused to acknowledge why he was really there. He claimed he had been there for weapons violations and flat out refused to say what he did. After winning him over about how he hated women too, which was a lie, did Keene really start to get some truth out of Hall. After months of asking Hall about what really happened, he finally opened up about what he did. He said that after getting Jessica into his van, he tried to kiss her. When she refused and started fighting back, he put a cloth rag that had chloroform on it over her mouth. He then moved her to the back of his van, where he says he must have had sex with her. Once finished, he said she began to cry for her mother, and then he panicked. He tried to find a way to get back to Indiana, but kept running into dead ends. He finally found the field where he was going to kill her, and after putting her up against the tree, he said he took 2 belts and a stick through them to twist around her neck like a tourniquet. When he came clean about Tricia, he said this time, after initially being friendly with her, he pulled a knife on Tricia and she willingly got into his van. When he tried to kiss her and take her clothes off, she started fighting him. He then claims he blacked out, but when he awoke, she was dead and had several bloodstains on her clothes. He then folded the clothes into a pile in the park he assaulted her in and went home. Unknown to Keene, this statement matched the only physical evidence recovered, since a week after her abduction, her clothing was found where Hall said it should be. He then tells the same story about dismembering and burying her body. The day after Trisha's confession, Keene decided to see what else he could get out of Hall. As he was walking by the prison workshop, he saw Holland there without a guard blocking the door. He decided to go in to surprise Hall. As he was coming up behind him, he could see a map of Indiana and Illinois that was covered in red dots. Hall became startled when he realized Keene was behind him and instantly covered the map. When Keene asked him what he was doing, he saw that Hall had made a dozen or so falcons. These wood-carved falcons were very intricate and ornate. Hall told Keene that the falcons watched over the dead for him and that they were looking out for them. He then said he was sending these to his brothers so he could place them for him. Not wanting to press his luck any further, Keene slipped away and went to tell the FBI what he just said.
At this point, take that whole family and throw their ass in a motherfucking cell. Take the whole family and throw their ass in a fucking cell.
Later that night, Keene went into Hall's cell and told him what he really thought about how disgusting and vile Hall was as a person. During this tirade, Hall's eyes got as big as dinner plates, and he just kept repeating, "Beaumont sent you! Beaumont sent you!" The next day, Keene was whisked out of his cell and thrown into solitary confinement for harassing Hall. It would take several weeks for the FBI to bail him out. Once out of Springfield, Beaumont gave Keene a polygraph about his testimony, and he passed with flying colors. However, the FBI later stated that neither the falcons nor the map had ever been recovered. What happened to them has remained a mystery. What's also remained a mystery are the fates of all the women he's suspected or could have murdered. Hall has granted several interviews throughout the years and as recently as 2010. During these interviews,
This nigga still
including
alive?
a 2010 one with his brother Gary, where he admitted to 15 homicides in 7 states.
Man, this nigga still alive, bruh.
He's given details that have made investigators throughout the country hopeful about some of their cold cases. In several cases, Hall has given details only the killer could have known. However, despite his numerous confessions, Hall has retracted each and every one as being him relating to dreams. Perhaps because he keeps having these dreams, he's still incarcerated in different federal mental institutions. While investigators remain hopeful that future confessions are still a possibility, there's been no public traction made toward the dozens of cases Hall is suspected to be linked to. According to the FBI, they firmly believe he's linked to as many as 50 murders, with more
50?
estimates placing his body count around 3 dozen. Despite all this attention, Hall has never actually been charged with a single murder. Why this has never happened still remains a mystery. Perhaps investigators around the country feel content that after exhausting all his appeals, Hall will remain behind bars for the rest of his life. Nothing they could do as an office will change that, and maybe that's good enough for them, considering how difficult it was to prosecute Hall for just Jessica's murder. However, that is simply not good enough for the families of his victims. Hall should be investigated and prosecuted for as many murders as can be proven in court, if not for ensuring he stays in prison, but for the simple fact that the families of the women he killed deserve closure.
I don't know what the fuck is going on. Hey, alright, I don't know what's going on with all that right there, but yo, nah, like, yeah, his ass needs to be prosecuted. The family needs to be prosecuted, and like I said, thrown in jail forever. We gotta get these freaks up out of here, man. If you gonna do some torturers and shit like that, come on, man. We got a place for you. Cause this ain't right, man. And like I said, it's like these criminals. Y'all want to give these people life in jail. They be in jail with their feet up. They be in jail having it up. Like I could tell these war stories and reminisce. They have it up in that bitch. Why do y'all always say, "Oh yeah, we just want them to get life in prison"? Do y'all not understand that this is like you hear criminals all the time that go to jail say, "Hey, as long as we're not in the hole and we with population, general population, oh we 23 and 1, as long as we could talk to other people, man, it seems like we still on the streets. We just don't have no females, but come on, man, I can interact all I want. Come on, bro, we can't keep doing this shit, bro. We can't keep doing this, bro. I'll let these niggas just be in this bitch just having it up. These niggas get to talk about all the war stories and get cravings. They get urges like, man, I'm in this thing with my feet up having war stories. That shit not right to me, bro.